Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of The Fishing Teacher, and really appreciate you guys swinging by the channel to check out today's episode. And guys, today I want to talk about when you catch a drum bass fish and what that means and how you can use the drum to your advantage to help you catch more bass. Because a lot of people, I see them when they catch a drum, they cuss it out and everything. But if you're catching drum, it means one thing that we're going to talk about in today's video that's going to help you guys out. And also, guys, the thumbnail in the video here, you see that crankbait in there. That's that Megabass Super Z2 crankbait. That particular color that I'm using, that chartreuse back, I've been catching a bunch of fish on it the last 3 weeks or so. I'll put that link, I'll put that bait in my tackle warehouse link in the description of this video. And guys, just take it out there. If you've got stained water, like any water visibility under like 2 foot, just throw that thing around, rocky banks, riprap, lay down trees, grass beds. It's a really, really good color for the month of September. So I'll put that link in the description. Really appreciate that. Okay guys, actually I was out fishing today and caught a bunch of bass on that crankbait that's in that picture there. We also caught some drum, and I want to talk a little bit about what that means when you catch a drum bass fishing, because drum are in most of the lakes and rivers around the country here. And one of the things about a drum that people don't realize is, even though they have a mouth almost like a carp, like a rubbery mouth, a drum is a voracious predator that goes after live bait. I mean, they chase down lures. It's really remarkable considering how they're built, that they are a predator like they are. They look like, to me, like they're some bottom feeders, feeding on algae and plankton. But guys, a drum will hit a lure super hard. And here's the thing that you want to use that to your advantage. Drum never are in an area of the lake that's unproductive, because drum know where the food's at. Drum hang in areas where there are very, very healthy crawdad populations, very healthy shad populations. That's their two main forage. So if you're catching drum, you have to consider that as a really good sign that you're in a good spot. Like I said, you're not going to catch drum where there's not a lot of other life in the lake. So I never get mad or discouraged if I catch a drum. It gives me a lot more confidence of where I'm fishing at. Thing about a drum, here's another thing about it, it's like it can sort of give you a clue on what the bass want too, because a lot of times the bass and the drum sort of have the same moods and personalities, and it gives you a clue or an indication on what the bass are feeding on. Because since bass feed on the same type of stuff that bass do, and the primary forage of a drum is crawdads and shad, based upon the lures that you're catching, it can tell you if the fish are targeting shad or crawdads, based upon the lure selection that you're using. Whether it be any type of a bottom bouncing lure like a jig or a creature bait, that's sort of a crawdad imitator. Any type of a crankbait or a moving bait is sort of a shad or a perch imitator. So here's a couple different things that I want to talk about, as far as, number one, how to keep drum off your bait if you're catching a ton of drum, and some things that you can learn, just in that particular water as well. One of the things that you will find out about drum is that they will bite a lure different than a bass as far as working that lure. Now, let me give you an example. Say, for example, you're catching a lot of drum on a jig or a tube, or, some type of a creature bait, which I have a lot, especially you guys that fish up in the Great Lakes. If you're catching drum on a jig or some type of slow moving bait, most of the time it's going to be because you're just crawling that bait along a little bit too slow. You can trigger a reaction strike from a bass if you pop it off the bottom, and by popping it off the bottom, that keeps the drum off of those lures. Very seldom are you going to catch a drum if you're high hopping a bait, like you're popping your worm or your jig a foot or two off the bottom. But if you're crawling that jig or something along the bottom, you may get more, you may get a lot more drum with it. So a lot of times, if I'm in an area where I'm catching drum and bass both, I'll change my retrieve. I'll get a little bit more aggressive with my retrieve, and that helps out. That's the same with the moving bait too. One of the things I've noticed about a moving bait for drum is there's two things. Drum will bite a moving bait a lot of times when your moving bait is not making contact with the bottom. So like a crankbait, for example, I catch a lot of drum if I'm throwing the crankbait down a rocky bank and it's not quite hitting the bottom. Also, if I use sort of a slow medium retrieve, they'll catch a lot of drum. Bass, on the other hand, they will react more to a reaction strike. So one of the things that you can do to keep those drum off you and trigger the bass a little bit more is, if you're throwing that crankbait or whatever, make sure it's knocking those rocks, deflecting off of wood with a little bit faster stop and go retrieve. And that faster erratic stop and go retrieve and the deflection action coming off those rocks, a lot of times, you'll get more bass than you will drum in that. I know that's not a problem. I mean, the only time that I've really had a big issue with drum is like fishing the Great Lakes. If you fish a tube, say for example, if you go up in Lake Erie and fish a tube and you crawl that tube along the bottom, you just barely twitch it, you're going to catch a bunch of drum. But if you hop it hard off the bottom, you're not going to catch that many. But the main thing I want to reiterate in this video is, get excited if you catch a drum, man. And another thing with that, also in correlation with the drum, catfish are the same way. If you catch channel catfish or blue catfish or flathead catfish on the same type of deal that I just talked about, that's another good indication that those fish are in there, because there's just a lot of bait fish. The more diversity of the predatory fish, like the catfish and the drum, those type of rough fish, white bass, even another fish with that, it just tells you that you're in a really good area and you should really slow down and fish a little bit more thorough. So anyway, guys, thanks for tuning in. We'll talk later.